I'm Remona Ali, and welcome to the Bradford Literature Festival's In Conversation with Michael Rosen, one of the best-known figures in the children's book world. Michael is a multi-award-winning author, performer, broadcaster, lecturer, scriptwriter, and one of Britain's best-loved poets. His latest book, Many Different Kinds of Love, A Story of Life, Death and the NHS, recounts his experience of contracting COVID-19 and pulls together a patchwork of his poems together with letters from NHS workers who wrote messages of support in a diary at the end of his hospital bed. The book has fast become a bestseller, and I'm delighted and honoured to be with Michael in the garden of his London home to discuss it. Michael, thank you so much for letting us share this time with you today. We really appreciate it. I feel like it's a miracle sitting here with you right now.
Well, thanks for coming. And the robins seem to be joining in, don't they? Quite loudly. So
they're celebrating.
Yes.
They're
Nice.
Celebrating that we're here together. So we just hope that you gain strength in every passing minute and hour.
Thank you.
And I read your book through tears and an array of snotty tissues. It is pretty soul-shaking stuff, you know. It has your warmth, of course, and it's deeply personal and intimate and vulnerable as well. And we've been looking at the pandemic from the outside in, and your book is very much about looking at it from the inside, really intimately. And as well as your voice, it includes the voices of NHS staff. So why was it so important to tackle it in this way?
In a way, I don't think I had a choice. It's quite difficult to describe, but when things happen to me, I do tend to write about them. I think if you've been around in the writing business as long as I have, and writing the kinds of things I do, which tend to be a bit like diary entries of one sort or another, we call them poems, paragraphs, free verse, whatever you want to call it, I do tend to do that anyway. So then when something big happens, utterly kind of upsetting, there's a French word, bouleversant, that means like turns you over, a ball turning, literally. I just sort of feel, well, I'll write about it, and I'm not thinking, oh, I'll publish that. I just think that's what I'll do. So once I came home from hospital, I couldn't write while I was in hospital. Once I came home, then I just started jotting things down in notebooks and on my phone, actually. I was just sitting there and I sort of collected them together. And then at some point after I had maybe about 50 little bits, maybe then, I think I sent them off to people who know about such things. Yeah. And they said, oh, this is interesting. So then it gathered pace after that. And
it's like, yeah, as you say, it's like a gathering. It's, I mean, I called it a patchwork, but, you know, how would you describe it? It's like...
Exactly that. Patchwork's a word I've used as well. I've also called it a mosaic. So you can see we're both groping for a metaphor here, but it is the idea that it isn't, strictly speaking, a continuous narrative like a novel or a short story, but the story is told through bits. I mean, it's a very old form in a way, because the novel first started with letter novels, you know, with letter from him to her, her to him. And in a way, it sort of reproduces a bit of that, and also nicks a bit from the modernist poets. You know, actually one of the very first poems that were written like that, in this what we call the free verse form, were actually written about a guy who spent time in hospital having his foot amputated, who then later served, I think, as the model for Long John Silver, Robert Louis Stevenson's novel Treasure Island. And it was a poet called W.E. Henley. It's quite interesting. There's a little cycle of poems where he's doing what I did, which is describing the scene around him and what's happened to him. And it's quite funny. I think that might have been in the back of my mind as I started scribbling.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because it's you, it's your life, but it's everyone's lives around you and their observations, and almost like I don't know, it's like a fishbowl, but at the same time, it's just so intimate. So it was really, really moving.
Well, let's stick with the fishbowl, because if I'm the goldfish inside, and then the people looking in are the nurses and Emma, my wife, and the doctors and so on, then one moment you're in the fishbowl with the goldfish, me, looking out, or just worrying about being a goldfish. And then outside, the people looking in saying, oh, look, the goldfish, it's asleep. No, what is it doing? So that's lovely too. And you don't often get a chance to do that. If you write a set of poems about yourself, then you quite often don't have what other people are thinking of you. But because the nurses left this patient diary, as it's called, very patient I call it, this patient diary for, well, the 40 days I was in a coma. Yeah. It gives you a 360 degrees, doesn't it? So let's stick with the goldfish. They're looking in.
Yeah. And how did it feel reading those messages later? Because obviously this all happened when you were in the coma and they were writing these very deeply personal messages to you. How did it feel reading them at that time? Was it very surreal?
To start off with, I couldn't.
I mean, in the, of
yeah,
course,
I mean, no, I don't mean when I was in the coma. No,
yeah.
I mean when I came home, I couldn't. So yeah, physically I couldn't to start off with, yes. But when I came home, sitting in the room there, and it was on the table, and I think Emma had put it there, and I didn't open it. You know that thing that there's certain actions that you do, but at certain things, sometimes it's significant what you don't do. Yeah. And it just sat there, and I thought, yeah, that's the diary. Yeah, no, that's the diary. And I didn't open it. And then when I did, I found it too upsetting, really. I don't know why. I mean, I can read it now and almost find it funny, because they're saying things like, you know, you support Arsenal and I support Derby County, and you don't seem very impressed by that because you sort of look the other way or something. And I mean, this is funny, isn't it? I know I'm really like on the, it's touch and go whether I'm going to live, and that upset me when I sort of came out. That was, you know, back in June and July 2020, and here we are sitting in May 21, and I'm beginning to find some of this stuff funny. Or when they give the descriptions of what it is they're doing to me, you know, moving me around in the bed, what do they call it? Suctioning my secretions. I mean, you know, whatever that is. Anyway, so these days it feels quite funny. But as I say, to start off with, no, I really couldn't. I couldn't bear to read it.
But there was some, I mean, kind of, as you say, like quite humorous moments, like, you know, there's like 15 staff singing your happy birthday around your bed. I mean, some people who are conscious don't have such great parties, do they?
Absolutely, terrific party and missed it. Yeah, that's right. You know, it is. And also well, I mean, the other thing that moves me, I'm not saying this, is that, and that still does, is the fact that the care and devotion that those nurses are expressing. I mean, we know that nurses use all their skills and knowledge and they're applying that to the people in front of them. But there's a bit of me that thinks, well, you don't have to say that stuff about, oh, we really hope you'll get better. I'm just a lump. I'm lying in bed and they're writing, looking at me, and I'm going, I mean, really? And they're going, oh, I think you can pull through, you'll do it. And it's all I can think of, and I wrote this in the book, is that they're behaving as I did as a parent to my children when they were ill. So, you know, when your kids are ill, you know, you bring them the painkillers and you give them drinks, and then you sit by the bed and you look at them and you say, you'll be all right, darling, you'll be all right, all that. And they did all that. So they behaved like parents. And as I said in the book, but they're not my parents. And that sort of naive realization, if you like, that they were doing that, but not just to me. I mean, they were doing that to, well, I was in a ward that was supposed to have 11 patients in it, and it went up to 24. And there's supposed to be one nurse per patient 24 hours a day. So you can't do that. There isn't room even, because you have one bay, and we were up against each other in the intensive care ward. You know, how could they do it? You know, monitoring beep, 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 beep. Yeah. And every now and then we're writhing about because we're getting delirium and all that. I mean, and then they've got time they could go home, have a cup of, you know, put your feet up, go to sleep, have a nice time. And they're writing that. It's incredible.
You know, your poem, you know, that these are the hands that you wrote for celebrating the 60th anniversary of the NHS. How do you feel about that poem now?
Well, it's a bit amazing. I mean, I wrote it, as you say, for the 60th, and I think, I've forgotten what year, well, it was 1948, so we're well beyond that now. And it was nice when it came out. The people, you know, enjoyed it. And then it took on another resonance because of the pandemic, and I think the BBC put it on as a kind of montage with different nurses and doctors saying the lines.
Yeah, it became an anthem.
It's gone up in hospitals, yes. and it was up by the side of my bed, and nurses would say that they liked it and so on. Well, if you write, you know, the nicest thing that can happen is that people say they read what you wrote and it was interesting, or they liked it, or it made them think this or made them think that. I mean, I often think writing is really a way of opening a conversation. I mean, you can open a conversation as we are, or if you write something and hand it to someone, it starts up another conversation over there in that person's head or with other people who read it. And this poem sort of became a conversation. It became a way for people to say thank you to the NHS. And also, I suppose, I'm glad that it wasn't just, you know, thank you to the wonder doctors, and they are. It's not to say they're not wonder doctors, but when you say the NHS, you do mean the people who clean the floor. You do also mean the people who are washing the laundry. You mean everybody. And I did try to sort of grab that idea that it is everybody, every NHS worker who is there, they are the NHS.
And you have been to the brink and back. You have 40 days in an induced coma. How has it now made you view life and death?
Yes. Well, the siren goes in the background to remind us. It's quite good, actually. It's a good sound effect of thinking about life and death. I like it. Yes. What does it make me think? Well, I suppose if I was 20, it would be different, but I'm now 75. So, I mean, I do feel, obviously, I'm in the last chapter, in the last act, however long that's going to last. And I suppose I think it feels like a lucky escape, because people don't quite realise this, but when they put you in a coma, it's then down to you. It's your body that's got to try and cure yourself, because it's a virus. The antibodies don't work against viruses. And then also, the thing about COVID is that it attacks many other things apart from just your respiratory system. So anything could fail. And you could get blood clots, which I did, so you could get strokes or heart attacks, brain stuff and so on. So I just feel, what do we talk about? Cats and 9 lives? You know, it's Michael Rosen and 1 life, I don't know. So I do have those feelings, and I try and sort of, deal with it as I'm describing it to you now. There's an awareness that was a close shave, we say, you know, that was a close escape. And there'll be plenty of people who've had that experience, you know, they're just about to step out on the road and a bus went past. Other people have had strokes, and, you know, it was just touch and go as to whether something would happen. I've had friends who, you know, had a big aneurysm, it's called, isn't it? And they lived on for a bit more, but then didn't. And you have a sense that life is actually quite precarious, I suppose. When I said that to somebody, they said, "What, a bit like a vase falling off the shelf?" And I thought, yes, exactly right. What a brilliant picture. That, yeah, we are vases sitting on shelves, and then someone goes, and that's it. And, you know, virus, how easy is it to get it? There we are, just caught the virus, badonk, gets in the body. Oh, this is a nice body. Work round here, chunk.
I mean, this ordeal, I mean, how has it changed you as a person? And have you had to like relearn things about yourself?
Yes, I have. I've had to learn how to be patient. I've had to learn how to be persistent. So, you know, when I came off the ward, so I was in intensive care, then they put you on the ward, but I couldn't stand up and I couldn't walk. So I had to learn how to do that. And then anybody who's in intensive care, whether you've had COVID or not, you've got to decondition yourself. So you're deconditioned, you're basically a jelly. And then you've got about, I think, well, it's between a year and a year and a half if you're in for as long as me, as long as I was, to try and get fit of some level. But it's quite hard, because the harder you try, the weaker you feel the next day. I call it in the book alternate day syndrome. Yeah. So that you go, yes, okay, I can do it.
Yeah,
I got some little weights.
5 kg weights.
I got a punch bag over there, you know, sort of like all that. And then if I overdo it, the next day I'm like, you know,
go backwards.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sort of have to sit on the sofa, like kind of like that. So
goodness.
you got to be careful. So you've got to be persistent. and then you've also got to be patient. And you've also, you're dealing with the uncertainty. So something like that, it's quite disorienting and shaking of yourself and your mind. So you've got to deal with that as a sort of, I've got to deal with that as a way of being, that I'm sort of less certain. I was watching a film of myself doing a show for 1,500 Key Stage 3, secondary school children at the Hay Festival. And I could see how animated and active I was, and it was a bit difficult for me to watch it. It was only the day before yesterday. And I sort of felt a bit sad, because I sort of thought, well, will I be able to do that again? And I had a sort of sense of loss in a way so that operates as well.
Yeah, actually, I want to pick up on grief and loss, and how has that played out for you? I mean, there are different types of grief, aren't there? It's not only about losing somebody, it's about losing who you are as well, sense of who you are. So how have you come to terms with that? Yes,
that's right. I mean, we have a phrase, losing yourself, don't we? You lose yourself in a book. But there's also the idea that you lose the self you were. So I do feel that. I do feel that I've lost myself. And that's difficult, because I don't know whether to accept this is a new being and therefore just get on with it as that. Because if you spend too much time just sort of dwelling on it, you become like those people who can only live in the past and go, oh well, I scored a goal for England. Yeah. It's very difficult for sports people, for example, because when you hit 35,
it's over. Game over.
Game over sort of thing. And what do you do for the rest of your life sort of thing? And I've heard footballers and sports people being very profound about it, because it's difficult. That sense of the loss of the self that had value to other people. So I guess some of me is sort of trying to prove to myself that I've got a self. I mean, it may seem a bit odd. We're sitting here and I'm talking. I look like somebody who hasn't got completely collapsed, but part of me is trying to prove to myself I've got a self, if that makes sense.
It does. It does make sense. That is. But also, you're here, and it's like only a little over a year since you were on the brink of death, and you're looking so well and you're speaking so beautifully. So are we going too fast as well to expect a full
That's
recovery?
What the doctor said to me yesterday. I because of this eye, which is, I can just about see you. I can see your scarf and I can see your paper, but I can't see much more than that.
Oh, that's probably a mercy.
No, I can't see your top, you see. So that eye. The ophthalmologist, I have to say that quite carefully, ophthalmologist. He was quite optimistic yesterday, actually. He said, oh, well, you've got quite good sight right in the middle of your eye, he said. The rest a bit foggy. He said, but it's early days. And I thought, is it?
Yeah.
Is it? Is it early days? Is it year early days? Well, that's the wonderful Mr. Sharma. Those were his words. And I sort of went away going, early days.
Yeah.
Early days. Is it early days? So that's been my little catchphrase for the last 24 hours, actually. Yeah. Early days?
Oh, absolutely. A friend of mine had brain surgery. She couldn't see anything. And after a year, she started to be able to work out shapes. And now, it's been more than a year and she's really getting her vision back. So honestly, miracles happen all the time.
Music in my ears. Well, in that ear, this ear doesn't work out. Yeah. Well, music in my ear. Yeah.
Well, you've got that. That sound's going to be even better. That's going to have to work stronger now. But what do you hope that this book will convey most of all?
Well, it's in the title, love, that there are many different kinds of love. In this strange dream that I had where this man appeared, a German guy standing in sort of blue jeans, kind of bib and brace, saying there are many different kinds of love. The love for your lover, the love for your family, the love for friends. And then in the end, you've got a love beyond that. And he says that to me. And, it feels a little bit like, when Paul McCartney said that Let It Be was his mother in a dream came to him and she said, let it be, Paul. And I just, every time he tells that story, I find it really quite moving, that there are occasionally, profound things come through dreams, and I'm not mystical about dreams at all. I think we make the dream in our heads when we're asleep. And the fact that I've got this person in my dream saying there are many different kinds of love. In a way, it is the moral of the book, which is that I am loved by Emma, I'm loved by my children, I'm loved by the GP who helped save my life, I'm loved by those nurses. But you know, it's a caring kind of love, and it's like a waves that ripples out and then comes back again. And also, of course, it's not just me. I mean, the book's very egocentric about me, but it's really saying this is going on everywhere else. And if I want to say a model of how we can be in society, I'd say, well, the NHS expresses that. If you think of the rollout of the vaccination programme, this is an incredible achievement of public health. When I was queuing and these helpers and the people giving you the jab and the whole business of how the vaccine was developed, this is an incredible cooperative human effort in order to save and help human beings. And I just think, we've got a fantastic model here of how society can operate. So that's part of the moral. I mean, there might be some other stuff about, I don't know, the other words we've used today, persistence and patience and fortitude and some of these other things. And that's fine. I don't want to get too self-congratulatory about that because it's not necessarily how I always feel.
But it's all love, isn't it? Love is just, it has so many different forms, like you say. It's just so beautiful.
And you do actually, I know it sounds very psychobabbly, but you do actually, in the midst of all this, have to love yourself. Because if you don't, you will, if you like, the negation of yourself, the negativity will take over. So there is part of you, it sounds, when you do love yourself, it does sound arrogant and egotistical, but you've got to, because the alternative is that you won't eat, you won't clean yourself, you won't wash your clothes, you won't get your hair done, you'll do none of these things, and you'll dissipate, it'll just sort of go to nothing. So there is another aspect that you do actually have to love yourself.
Beautifully, and it's so beautifully captured in the book as well. But there are also places where I feel like you don't use words, like there's almost like a space, like when you say that the doctor says to you, you're going to have a 50-50 chance when you're put to sleep, and you're like, yeah, well, I'll sign, I'll do it. And it's just, and afterwards it's almost like this gap, and I'm like, and like my emotions kind of come in there. So do you think those spaces are also really important for us as well as the words? Well, yes. You see, literary critics, so I'll put my other hat on for the moment, my PhD hat, literary critics have looked at the way in which readers read and interpretation. And obviously, with writing, you can leave gaps or you can tell the reader what to think. The most extreme form of telling readers what to think was dear old Enid Blyton. So it's one of the reasons why she's popular. So you get a group of girls arguing, say in her book Mallory Towers, and then one of them is horrible, and then the others punish her, and then Enid Blyton writes in the narrative, and that served her right. Now that's great if you're a child reader, because you might go, oh, wait a minute, was that? And then Enid Blyton holds your hand and says, and that served her right. Now you can go to an extreme opposite, and you go to modernist writers who leave things hanging in the air. And believe it or not, yes, the critics called this gaps. They did. There's a famous critic, I'm going to forget his name because I have famous Hollywood stars forgetting syndrome. Oh, yeah.
Yes,
this
that's
is really
right.
funny in the book.
So, I forget Tom Cruise's name in the book. I can't even remember his name when I wrote it. All I could remember was Mission Impossible, and I couldn't remember his name. I forgot George Clooney's name the other day as well. I mean, how bad is that? And Meryl Streep.
Not George. I
mean, how can the world exist if you forget their names?
Oh, no.
So they do talk about gaps, and these are really, really why reading is so active. And so in that one about where I asked whether I wake up, and he says, you've got a 50-50 chance, and if you don't put the ventilator on, he says 0, I signed. I've even left out something that that's occurred to me since. When he said 50-50, I thought, hey, that's actually quite good. And now whether that's because I was already high on whatever they give you, or whether it's because I was high because I had no oxygen in me, I'm not quite sure. But I actually thought, I can remember the sensation, And part of this stuff is about remembering sensations. When he said 50-50, now I think about it, it's with complete horror because your life's like that. But actually, when he said it, I thought, that's not bad. 50-50, let's go for it.
Amazing.
Will I wake up? 50-50.
And also, well, thank God you did, and you're here and speaking to us, so that's just such a blessing. You talk about memory as well, and even the privilege of having a memory, and the trauma that you went through. Does that make you see memories in a different way? Does it make you revisit them in a different way?
Yes. So we talked about self and losing yourself and the sense of self. If you lose memory, then you lose your sense of self. You lose where you come from. We know all sorts of people have trauma, sometimes because they're separated from home or their homes have been destroyed, refugees, all sorts of people have problems about losing what they had and can't get back to it, either mentally or physically. And if you lose memory, then you're left saying, well, who am I? What am I here for? What have I done? And right, so I've got the fact that there's the coma, which I can't retrieve at all. So that's 40 days. Then I've got 8 days in intensive care. Can't retrieve any of that. So that's 48. Then I'm on the ward for about, actually, I keep forgetting that. Emma keeps telling me it's about 10 days, I think. I've forgotten most of that. And then I've got another 2 or 3 months where at the time, I think I was remembering things, but I wasn't. So I had a sort of short-term memory loss. So Emma would tell me something one day, and then the next day I'd forget it. And then now I have a problem about remembering that. So there's all these layers of memory and remembering and forgetting, and it's a very peculiar feeling. And I have now just something else I've realised is that whereas some things like George Clooney's name that are just gone and then something Bedoin comes back, I'm getting very intense, they're not exactly flashbacks, but let's say there's a boy in my class when I'm 11, okay? I won't say his name. If I just go like that, it's almost as if I can touch him. I can see his shorts, and I can see his face, I can see his eyes, I can hear his voice, right? And it's really peculiar, and I'm getting it quite a lot now. It feels almost uncomfortable. It's so, immediate, so there. And if I concentrate on a variety of moments or places in my past, it's going as if it's suddenly illuminated, like a kind of...
Like zoomed in.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I could name a holiday in France by some lakes, and it's raining, and the tent and so on, suddenly there, and it's like almost as if I'm in it. I mean, it's happening
tangible.
more and more, just this last 3 or 4 weeks. Very strange.
Extraordinary. That is extraordinary. And you've mentioned your wife Emma several times, and in the book, I feel like we know her. You know, you let us into her feelings and her words as well, and her love for you, which is just unshakable, and her courage and her humour as well, which is just lovely. Yeah, does that make the book more sacred to you in a way, with her voice?
It made it difficult actually, because when I came home, I didn't realise, I know this is all mad, but I didn't realise that I'd been sitting up there in that hospital for, well, let's call it 50, 55 days before I went to the rehab. So about 55 or nearly 60 days. I didn't realise the length of that. So when I came home and she tried to explain to me, I got quite upset and I was crying because, first of all, that I didn't know that, and also, what was she and the kids doing? Because every time she lifted the phone or the phone rang, she didn't know whether I'd pegged out. She really didn't know. And then I switched it round and thought, what would I do in that circumstance if she had been up the road and you couldn't go to see them, because that helps a bit if you go and see somebody in hospital, but you couldn't because of the pandemic. So she couldn't go in. So she's just sitting there, and also lockdown, so you couldn't socialise. And I got overwhelmed thinking of that. Of what do you do? I mean, I sort of almost dare not ask her really. How did the days go? How did you know? I mean, the best thing would be to try and forget that I was there, I guess, is that, you know, play loud music and, you know, dance a bit and cook something nice and tell each other jokes, watch telly, to try and sort of forget. I know I would like try and watch bad football, you know, because I'd run out of good football and have to get on to sort of third division in a country that, you know, that is not very good at football, you know. I don't want to slag off any country. Or watch a sport that I don't even understand, you know, like Australian rules football. I'd sit and watch that in order to try and space out. But she didn't, I don't know. And she seems to have been absolutely like a rock and also kind of quite sardonic with it. I mean, she's got, I mean, some of her bulletins to the family are really quite funny. I mean, and I just think... I think I'd have completely lost my sense of humour. You know,
you need it in the bleakest times. That's why sometimes some of the best laughs I've had have actually been at funerals. Like, it's that release. It's that fine line between tragedy and kind of humour and laughter. Yeah.
Well, you know, Shakespeare's got it with Mercutio when he says, I'll be a grave man in the morning. You know, it's a pun on grave because he knows he's dying.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, you couldn't see anybody when you were in your recovery period. When did you feel most like connected to Emma, to the children, to who you were?
The very first moment was when we met in, well, she came in and basically, we ought to say, she was the game changer that got me out the coma, because when you're in a coma, you're trying to get better without you knowing you are. But of course, the doctors worry that the coma you're in is going to be permanent. You're not going to come out of the coma. So they then have the problem how to wake you up. So the first time she came in and held my hand and played, she played recordings of the family. And apparently, according to Professor Hugh Montgomery, this was the game changer. So there's that moment. I wasn't aware of it. Then we met again on that same landing at the atrium, as it's called at the hospital. And I can remember that, just feeling, I'm feeling a bit dizzy. And then they wheeled me out again, but I can see her there and I can't turn round to say goodbye. And then we met in the garden outside, and that was lovely. That was special. But the real sort of lovely moment was she came to the rehab hospital. Well, it was lovely, except I got anxious. It's really quite funny. So we had a gym, and I was like, you know, I'm going to really do well now. You know, it was like a really showy offy, you know, slightly kid and mum thing going on here. Look at me, I'm in the swimming garden, mum, look at me.
Like impressing her.
Yeah, exactly. And so I kind of walked, but I was nervous because I wanted to show the rest of it. And so I remember Ashma saying, it was the occupational therapist, and she said, you know, you can walk the length of the gym now, Michael. And I did, but I was way like that. And it's because I was nervous. So but it was just the fact she sat there and sort of smiling and saying, it's all right, it's okay, you know, don't worry. But I was so anxious about, look, I'm not very good, am I? I can only walk 20 strides, and maybe that's what I'm going to be like for the rest of my life. Because I did think that. I thought, you know, when they gave me the Zimmer, I thought, that's me, Mr. Zimmer. You know, I thought I was going to be a Zimmer guy. Bob Dylan, Robert Zimmerman, you know, I thought that's it. And then I thought, when they gave me the wheelchair, I'd be a wheelchair person. I thought, that's all right. And in fact, Aditpan and me, we wrote to each other. I thought maybe he's got a few tips and stuff, you know, and Adi was very nice. And I thought, well, that's okay. And Emma said, you're not coming back in a wheelchair. And I thought, what? And then they gave me the stick. I thought, this is good. I could be a stick person. And I called it Sticky McStick. And, you know, it was good. And I felt all right. And then the guy turned up, the physio turned up, and he said, you're becoming a bit stick reliant. God, what am I supposed to do? Throw it away? Yes. I've still got it, actually. And my friend Anthony gave me an Arsenal stick as well, which I call Gooner McStick. So that's good. But then I didn't need the stick. And Emma's sort of thing saying, you're not coming back in a wheelchair. No, you're not coming back with a stick. And in fact, I walked down the front path into the house holding the stick like that to show that I wasn't using it. So, yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So she's been she is crucial to your healing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how people who, for whatever reasons, haven't got an intimate person near them, whoever that might be, I don't know how you have the strength to do that on your own. I mean, I really don't. I mean, hats off, people can do that.
And to just talk about words and healing. I mean, as I mentioned, my brother's a GP, he's a doctor, and when he was a medical student, he was marked on his bedside manner. So how important or how powerful can words be when it comes to healing?
Words and touch, it's both. So touch is a language, and I've written a poem about that, about the idea that
I love that
when
poem.
you lie there and someone goes like that, you can actually read a message, not just his hand or her hand is on your leg, but whether they're in a hurry or whether they've got time to, or you can just put words to the touch. If they sort of grip you a bit hard, that maybe that's part of their anxiety. And you start to recognize in the different nurses and doctors how they're doing it. So there's the touch language. And then, yes, there's the words language. I picked up, I mean, I love having fun with some of this, is when I asked the doctor about the blood clots in my in my lungs, and she said, you'll digest them. And I just instantly, this image came to me of blood clots sitting there in the tubes. In fact, later I was told it was in the saddle of my pulmonary vessel, which is a nice metaphor as well, because it goes like that above your heart. And it was sitting there. And the idea that I was kind of reaching into myself and going, I mean, of course, digest doesn't mean that. But when we say digest in normal life, we say, eat it and digest it. But of course, you've got other ways of digesting things. And I'm just having fun with it.
You're so clued up on all the medical jargon now. I mean,
well,
yes.
Exactly. That's part of the fun of it. And so when a doctor says that to you, or then again, somebody tells you you're going to have an echocardiogram. And I struggle with the and in the end I had to call it an echocardigan. It was the only thing I could call it, echocardiogram. I couldn't actually say tracheostomy for about 3 or 4 months. I kept saying bronchi.
Really?
I was playing around with brachy and bronchi, and I couldn't get tracheostomy, even though, believe it or not, in earlier life, I've dissected a trachea, which is what it's based on. So when I was a putative medical student. So I couldn't say tracheostomy, which is kind of symbolic, isn't it? This thing's gone into me, stopped me talking, because it's bypassed my vocal cords, and I can't say the word. It's lovely, isn't it?
That's amazing.
Couldn't say
it.
That's it. Tracheostomy.
Tracheostomy.
Yeah.
Got it.
You've got it. Yeah,
Just
and in
about.
fact, they mostly call it a trachea, So
yeah,
that's kind of, in medical jargon.
Slang.
Yeah, he's got a trachea. No, we've taken his trachea out. Yeah.
And you've talked about, in your Word of Mouth episodes as well on Radio 4, you've talked about how the NHS uses language as well, haven't you? And, and I've thought about how we receive words as well. Like you can be receptive to words, and it depends on the package that you have, like your personality, your emotions, your beliefs. So it really depends on how you receive that. It depends on who you are. How do you think the way you were, how did you think that affected the way you received some of the words that you were hearing?
I think because I do listen out for words and look at signs, it does give you a place to sit where, in a sense, it sort of intervenes so that the raw emotion doesn't happen to you. People who make lots of puns and jokes, this is a way of keeping emotions at bay for a bit. The image of the sad clown, the deeply troubled life, but the person's a comedian, the person who does lots of punning, but you can't get them to talk about relationships. These stereotypes, they do have some reality to them. And I know that to sit there lying in bed musing on a word like tracheostomy or musing on ear, nose and throat. I'm thinking the ear, nose and throat hospital. I'm thinking, then it said it was the Royal Ear, Nose and Throat Hospital, and then thinking, oh right, so this is a hospital for the royal ear and the royal nose and the royal throat. Have they only got one? I mean, it's just crazy stuff, of course, but it's just fun and it keeps you going, doesn't it? Because you're going in and, well, I was quite worried they were going to have a look down there and see whether, so you know that you're going to be a bit of that, and what are they going to see down there? Are they worried about, whether my vocal cords have got nodules or have collapsed or something? Because I was talking like this most of the time when I came out of hospital. And in fact, it was nothing to do with the vocal cords. It was all to do with the fact I wasn't using my diaphragm.
Oh, really?
Right? So I was forgetting to breathe. I was going, yes.
Forgetting to breathe.
So the very first week, so to go and see, anyway, the royal ear and the royal nose and the royal throat. I thought, anyway. So it does. It delays the onset of emotion if you dwell in the world of words. It'll come back and bite you though, so it's all right. And it's a relief in a way. It's a relief to go there.
Well, it's almost good to hear that there is relief somewhere in there, isn't it?
And in writing, I mean, if we say, why'd you bother to do this stuff? I mean, it's there, it's happened to you. And we know there are millions of people, typically men coming back from wars don't write about the experiences. They're too horrific for them. They've got shell shock and post-traumatic stress and so on.
Yeah, I mean, was it painful or cathartic? I mean,
well, exactly. So why bother? And for me, it's a relief, it's a release, and it's also a settling. Is that you have these feelings and emotions that are very powerful, and then you put them into words, and there's a sense of, so that's the shape, that's the order of it. And you sort of test it for authenticity. You test it and say, was it really like that? Did I really think that? Did I really say what I wanted to say? And all that is actually very helpful for your state of mind. It's very helpful for finding out the truth about it, because it's pretty difficult to know. Yes? So I find that very helpful. Some people love going to see somebody, going talking, the talking cure. Well, there's a writing cure as well.
Yeah. You say early on in the book, I feel like I'm losing home. Do you think that you found it again? Yes,
very much so. No, I did feel I've lost it. I mean, I had one moment, I think I've written about it. I said to Emma, it's okay, I could live upstairs because it's next door to the loo. And I need that because I can only walk about 20 steps. And so I could live upstairs. And she wrote back to me, well, why would you need to do that? And then I thought, well, because there's no downstairs loo, right? But we could put one in the cupboard under the stairs. Yes, so I sat there planning how we could get plumber in and have to move the coat. So we have to, all that. When I came home, you know what I found out?
What?
We got a downstairs loo. I'd actually forgotten that we got a downstairs loo. So I literally lost home. Yeah? I lost, lost a loo. That's quite funny, really.
But part of your home.
And then when I came home, I feel a bit guilty about this, okay? Emma, when we moved into this house, did incredible stuff to convert what was a bit of a shambles. It was multi-occupied and all the rest of it. And she turned this house into an incredible place. And I'll admit, I may not have been as appreciative as I should have been. Okay, that may be an understatement. Right? And when I came home, I almost wept at how lovely it was, and that I'd forgotten it, and even that I was guilty that I hadn't appreciated it. And I think I've written about sitting on the balcony at the front of the house, and she'd made a little herb garden, and rubbing my hands through the thyme, the little bush of thyme, because I love the smell of the Mediterranean countries, France and Italy and so on, where the thyme grows wild. And just thinking, wow, and you can't see it, but this room there it's like a glass room, and I sit and have my breakfast in there. And when I do, I just think, this is magic. And I think that every day. So I have found home, but I did lose it, and I lost it doubly.
So you found it again doubly? Maybe?
Yeah, it's a double whammy, yes, I have. And yes, indeed. And there's all sorts of corners to it that I either didn't know or had forgotten and that I enjoy. And I don't know whether you can see no, you can't. But my son's got a goal there that's, that he puts up to whack a football into it, and just occasionally I kind of roll a ball very carefully into it. And so there are all these corners that I re-find, so that's lovely. That's
lovely. Thank you so much. You've just been so generous with your words and your time. We'd like to just ask you to do a little reading, if we may.
Yes. From the book. What should we read? Is there one that you would like me to read?
I could not select it. There were just so many. I've turned pages, but do you have something that you would like to particularly read? Because I don't want to kind of be selfish.
Yeah. Right. It's quite handy if you do, and then I can find the page. There's the one about...
I did like The Dream.
Okay.
Because I thought that was beautiful, and there was another one. I did really love the language of your hands speak, that one as well, but that was...
Shall we do that one then? What page is that?
127.
127. Here we go. So this is about the nurses and the doctors, yeah. Your hands speak. Touch is a language. Each palm, each fingertip is a line from your stories. I get what they each say. This hand is in a hurry. This hand hesitates. These hands are worried. They catch me as I slope sideways. This hand knows a lot. It hunts for the lumps where previous jabs filled me with blood thinner. This hand hunts for bed sores. It spreads Vaseline and kindness.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Remona.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much indeed.
For your time and for your beautiful words and for your wisdoms and your love as well. And thank you for intimately and being so intimate and open with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Remona. Thank you.
That was lovely. That was beautiful.